Okay, looks like we have a quorum. All right, let's get started. So I call this meeting of the Administration and Finance Committee of the Boston Region MPO to order. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_non_discrimination. I probably can't read it in simplified Chinese or any of the other languages, so thank you. This is the virtual meeting guidelines. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. Participants can mute and unmute themselves. I should also invite everyone to put any pronouns they choose. To participate in the discussion, please use the raised hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The presenter will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Jonathan Church via email at jchurch@ctps.org or call him at 857-702-3709. Next slide, please. This is the accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level AA standard and revised section 508 standards, If you require any additional accommodation in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Jonathan Church, MPO staff at jchurch@ctps.org or 857-702-3709. Next slide. Introductions. So we're going to call on members of the committee to please introduce themselves. We'll go Eric, Derek, and then Len. So go ahead, Eric, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Derek.
Morning, everybody. Derek Cravat, MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning.
And Leonard Diggins with the Advisory Council, being no other adjectives associated like with Eric.
Okay, and I don't see any other committee members. Does anybody else see Dennis? Okay, if he comes, we'll certainly let him in. That is the introduction of members. We'll move to public comment. Does anybody have a comment? If so, please use the raise hand function as I explained, and we will be happy to take your comments. You can always also comment or ask questions as we go, as is our practice. Seeing none, let me turn this over to the presentation of the state fiscal year 2023 budget. This is a presentation, discussion, and vote to recommend that the Boston Region MPO approve the state fiscal year 2023 operating budget for the Central Transportation Planning staff. Tegan or Gina or Haral, I don't know if you want to make any introductions before we jump in. Please go ahead if you do.
Well, I would like, if you don't mind, Brian, to just provide a couple of high-level summary points before Haral Gandhi then takes off into the presentation and some more specifics on the numbers. So if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
Great. So thanks for joining us today. As Brian said, we will be discussing and hopefully approving the Boston Region MPO's state fiscal year 2023 operating budget. Haral, as I mentioned, who's our Director of Finance and Operations, will present a lot more detail, but I thought there were a couple of kind of high-level points that would kick off our presentation well before we sort of dig into the numbers a bit more. And in summary, I think the highlight here is that the budget assumes a 4% increase in revenue for the agency, which then correlates to a 4% increase in expenses. But first, in terms of the revenue, we do anticipate a significant increase in the federal funds, the federal planning funds, 5303 funds coming through to the MPO as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law. You may have heard bigger numbers than 4%. In fact, there's an estimation of about 17%, but we have an overall revenue picture that includes that and other sources. And with that bigger picture, we're assuming only a 4% increase for a couple of reasons. First, we get the funding, the federal funding on a federal fiscal year, which there are 3 more months after the start of this budget before that budget or that revenue kicks in. So we only receive a portion of that 17% in state fiscal year 2023. And second, the federal funds themselves make up, this year it'll be 80% of our assumed revenues. So there are other revenues that we are thinking about, and we're being a bit more conservative in our assumptions this year about those revenues. And that includes funding coming directly from Mass DOT, among other partner agencies. So we've been a little more conservative there to try to have a healthy and good expectation around the revenues for the agency. The 4% increase in expenses is not sort of even across, of course, all the line items. Some of them actually decrease while others will increase to sort of average out to that 4%. And I wanted to just highlight for you some of the key influences on those expenses, and they include retirements. We've had a significant number of those, and there are both expenses related to somebody retiring, but also there is a change in sort of the salary expectations when somebody retires and we hire new people. So new hires also factors into that. We also have the very specifically identified need for increased cybersecurity that we'll need to invest in, as well as the technology that we need to support a hybrid model of work as we approach that. So lastly, we are also in the 2nd year of implementing our strategic plan. And to implement a strategic plan, we of course need various kinds of investments in terms of staff time, equipment, professional development, and other things that our budget also accounts for. So with that, the next kind of key aspect of this budget is our overhead rate, which Haral will talk about. And I do want to highlight, as I have in past years, that we have been increasing our overhead rate over the past several years, which in my mind represents a greater investment in our agency and in our employees in a healthy way. I believe it's fundamental to our success. And I believe it's also fundamental to being able to recruit and retain staff, which is a challenge right now, particularly given the way the job market is. And so we need to invest what we can to be successful in that area. So we are hoping now to stabilize our overhead rate at around 120%, which I think is, again, a pretty good, healthy public sector or government other overhead rate. But in order to do so, one of the things that we really have to prioritize over the next several months is our recruitment and getting the people that we need on our staff to be able to get our work done, and then also make sure that our direct salaries are balancing out our other expenses. So with that, Brian, I'm happy to pause if there are any kind of questions on those summary points, or turn it over to Haral to start to get into a bit more of the detail around the budget.
Any questions for Tegan? Okay, seeing none. Haral, I believe the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Tegan. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to start off by talking about the status of the current year's budget and where we are through Q3 of the fiscal year. We just started our Q4. We'll be finishing up Q4 of the state fiscal year on June 30th of 2022. So I'll go through and provide a quick status, and then I will present the projections for the next state fiscal year and its projected overhead rate. So for revenue through Q3, this chart describes how much we had projected for revenue. The blue bars show what we had projected for revenues through Q3 of state fiscal year 22, and the brown bar shows how much the actual revenue it was that we received through March 31st. As you can see, the MPO projections are about 7% less than what we had projected, and the Mass Dot ones are half of what we had projected through Q3. The MBTA and other are pretty stable and level with what we had projected. But some of the reasons for the Mass Dot being lower than the expected would be the staff turnover. We had retirements. We were not able to fill those positions right away. And we had expected about 58 full-time positions in state fiscal year 22, and currently we're at about 50. And so some of the contracts and projects we were not able to fully work on. And some other contracts, for example, the MassDOT on-call contract that we get for about $300,000 every year, that one didn't come through. There's been a delay in receiving that contract, which was okay because we didn't have the staff fully to work on it, but that's why the MassDOT seems a lot less than what we had projected. And I'll go over the expenses, and then I'll pause to see if there are any questions for the status of the current fiscal year. This table shows the operating budget expenses through Q3 again. And column 2 is what we had approved for the 2022 budget. And then column 3 tells us what was expended through Q3. And as you can see, the overhead rate as of March 31st was running at about 121.92%. But we do project that our overhead at the end of the year, after completing this quarter, will be coming in at 119.97%. And which is significantly higher than the 109.09% that we have projected. So this year we will be our expenses are expected to be higher than our revenue. And that's again, due to staff turnover. We didn't have enough staff to charge out on those direct salaries. And our expenses, we tried to cut back as much as possible on expenses, but we don't have too many discretionary line items that we can we have too much control over. So the total annual costs, as we were expected to be $6.67 million, but we're going to come in around $6.1 million. So I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on the current state fiscal year before I present the projections for the next year.
Any questions for Haral?
I just have a quick clarifying question. So for the budgets on the last side, it's revenue, but the definition of that would be like if a contract is initiated. So like it's the expected amount that would be in the MassDOT. So just looking at the MassDOT line, that would be the expected amount for the year for all MassDOT contracts. And it's lower just because contracts that were expected to be put into place weren't actually executed because of the staffing. Sure, is that right? Like it's. I just want to clarify what it's showing. I think I understand it, but I just wanted to confirm that's the understanding.
Yeah. So the blue line shows what was projected for the three quarters, not for the year, but for the 3 quarters, and the brown bar shows what we actually received, which means that either we didn't get the contracts, like the contracts didn't come through, or we had contracts like the SPR contract that have task order money in it that did not get fully programmed. So we did have the contract in place, but we didn't necessarily spend out the full contract that we had.
Got
That
it.
makes sense, Derek?
Thank you. Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to do it as long as you're consistent across all things, and as I'm sure you are. So, any other questions for Haral at this point before she continues? All right, Haral, keep going.
Okay, so for the next state fiscal year 2023, we have a revenue assumption of about $6.93 million. As Tegan mentioned, we are seeing an increase in our MPO funding this year. It's going to be about 78% of our annual budget. The MassDOT is going to be about 10.6%. Typically, the MassDOT is at 14% and MPO is around 75% every year. So we do see that increase, and then the decrease in MassDOT. MBTA is about 8 to 10% every year. So even though we're getting an increase in MBTA from last year, overall budget for the year is pretty level funded from the MBTA. And then the other contracts are Massport, other municipalities. We had a project come in through City of Woburn this year, so we just allocate about $80,000. We anticipate that we'll receive about $80,000 in those kinds of revenue funding this year. And all of the details behind these charts are on the revenue projections sheet that we posted online. Silva, if you can add that to the chat box, that'd be great. So everyone can have reference to it. And then for the operating expenses, I'll talk about some of the major increases or decreases we're seeing in certain line items. And again, these documents were available and are available on our MPO website. So this one, this year, we're expecting the major line items that will be increasing are travel and transportation and the direct line item. I don't know if everyone has access to the CTPS staff, sorry, CTPS SFY 2023 requested operating budget table.
It's in the chat.
Okay, so on line 5, travel and transportation, we're assuming it looks like a significant increase over the 2023 projected versus what we requested versus what was projected. But that's due to staff going to conferences, and we had assumed less money last year for conferences because everything was happening virtually. But this year, we're hoping that we can send some of our staff to these conferences and professional development and training that are out of state. And that's why the increase is going from, and that budget line item is increasing from 15,000 to 25,000. But this year, we only spent 3,000 of that because we didn't know what was going to happen with the pandemic. So it looks like a significant increase, but we're trying to get back to what we had funded in previous years prior to the pandemic, and it was in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. The AMPO membership dues, last year we paid about $9,100, and that was for half the year. They changed their billing cycle, so now we're going to be paying for the full year in starting in July, and that's about $22,000 this year. These come out of the direct line items. So they come directly out of the MPO funding that we receive. This is not an overhead expense. And then on the overhead expense side, on line 22, you'll notice that the recruitment line item is increased. As we mentioned, we're going to be aggressively recruiting for a lot of positions this year. So we decided that we would need to put more money into that. Recruitment line item is for anyone who's coming for interviews out of state or moving expenses. Once they're hired, we pay half of the cost, up to $2,000 for any candidate that moves from out of state. So we are assuming that we might get some good candidates from out of state, and we want to keep that option open. Training and professional development, same thing. We're increasing. We're putting our we're making that into a $50,000 line item. We had budgeted $30,000 last year. We spent all of the $30,000 last year on some of the all staff trainings that we did. We did project management training. We did training for supervisors. There was some YW Boston training for the DEI piece. So this year we're expecting about $50,000 because we plan on doing some all staff DEI training, as well as just increasing our professional development needs for staff. The next one I would say is a significant increase is the transit subsidy. As you can imagine, we were working remotely last year, so we didn't have to provide a transit subsidy. But this year we are hoping to follow a hybrid work module. And so we'll be paying out some transit subsidy. So again, it's not a significant increase from prior to the pandemic, but it looks like a significant increase from last year. But we're trying to get back into what the line item was prior to the pandemic. Another one that Tegan kind of mentioned was IT equipment and IT contracts, IT related contracts. We are ramping up our cybersecurity. We're doing multi-factor authentication. We're buying software to back up some of the data from the different platforms that we use. So we're trying to back up data from like Google Drive to our servers. So we need to buy some software for that. And then for the equipment, we need to equip our conference rooms with hybrid meeting equipment, like Meeting Owl or Logitech meeting software and equipment. So we're also, this past year, we moved over to a laptop model instead of a desktop. So every employee at CTPS has their own laptop. And we have a 3-year lease. And the annual lease amount is about 25 to 30,000, depending on how many staff we have on board. So that's a increased expense every year on our computer line item. Another one would be the travel for, it's on line 56. The travel line item is increasing from about 3,500 to 10,000. This is to allow travel for administration staff. So anyone who's charging the administrative salaries, if we travel from out of state, this is the line item that we would charge. So that's why there's a significant increase in that line item. So I'll pause there and take any questions on any operating budget expenses or revenue piece. And this, I'm sorry, let me just go through the 5-year computer plan as well. As part of the operating budget expense, we have the 5-year computer plan, which this graphic shows all 5 years, but I would like to just highlight the next 2 years because the outer years are, you know, they're kind of in the gray. We don't know what's going to happen, but for the next 2 years, our plan is to, this year we would replace our backup system. It's for to replace, put any data on a hard drive, on a hard disk backup appliance. And that's going to cost about $60,000. And then in the SFY 2024, we're planning on buying one dedicated workstation for the model runs, which runs our TransCAD software. And then we have 2 servers that we would replace, as well as some of the firewall and storage stuff. And this is all tentative based on what our needs are next year. So this could change, but for 2023, our plan is to get the backup system that we had purchased back in 2015. Any questions on the operating expense or the revenue piece?
Eric or Lan, any committee members or anybody else have any questions for Haral?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for a comprehensive overview.
You're welcome. I like
Yeah,
it.
hi, and I agree with Eric. I do have some just minor curiosity questions regarding the leasing. So what do you get for the leasing of the computers?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, what do you get for the 25K or 28K for leasing computers?
I believe it's 60 to 65 laptops. So some laptops are higher powered to run the model runs and things like that. So we have 3 different kinds of laptops that we have for the agency. We have Macs for the graphics group. We have high powered laptops. There's about 15 of those. And then the rest of the staff get, I would say, regular laptops. I don't know all the specifications.
Right. So you get 60 machines for that. I got you. And do you get the OS with that too? I mean, so the operating system with that also?
We
No.
get the operating system, but not the, yes, the operating system is on there, and we do Microsoft 365 subscription. So all the Office products are on a subscription base.
So that's an additional cost in addition to the leasing cost.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, I'm just curious, how much is that?
I can get you that number.
Okay, don't worry about it. You know, so I mean, look, I'm sure that it makes sense to do this. I mean, but once again, it's more curiosity than anything else. So when you were buying computers, I mean, they were roughly how much per unit, and how many were you buying a year? And then what was
we had like a refresh program, and we replaced maybe 20, maybe 15 to 20 desktops every year.
I got you.
And so it was on a 5-year plan. So every 5 years, someone would get, you would get a new desktop. So it wasn't all like everything, everybody got it. So,
Right.
but the costs were very comparable if we did it over the 3 years, not like every year. Like every year we would see a smaller cost because we were only replacing 5 at a time.
Yeah.
But the lease, it's over 3 years, so it's about $25,000.
So it's roughly the same. Okay. And
Yeah.
all right. And
The additional cost one, just to be transparent, the additional cost is where we have to set up the virtual machines. So we are paying for 2 kind of machines or, endpoints for a staff member. So we have the laptop as well as a virtual machine that's on our network so that people, the staff can log into the virtual machine. So we have to buy these servers to host these virtual machines and put some memory on them so that they have computing power and things like that. So there is a little bit of additional cost, but not necessarily the hardware and equipment.
gotcha.
Yeah, and Len, I guess I would just add that this is an age-old debate, whether you lease or buy technology, copy machines, computers, and there is no right answer.
No, and like I said, their curiosity, I trust the
Yeah.
judgment of the staff.
Yeah, no, I know you do.
And generally, yeah,
Yeah.
it depends on what that determines. And usually I find that if you're not doing tech support or you don't have an in-house IT staff that's really devoted to hardcore tech support, you're better off leasing and having someone. But switching gears to staffing now. So are you anticipating having to the competition for staff? Already you're short staff. It's probably hard to hire people. Layer inflation in on top of that. Are you anticipating even greater difficulty in finding people in a way that may impact the budget?
I see Tegan's raised her hand, so I'll let her answer that.
Yeah, I know, Haral, you can speak to this too, but I kind of want to own this one because this is something we're just thinking about a lot throughout leadership at our agency. It's very interesting because at the beginning of the pandemic, it was easier to recruit. There were less jobs, right? And so we were able to actually recruit more successfully. Right now, it is extremely challenging. And one of the things that we've done to try to ensure that we're approaching this sort of rationally and doing the best we can is we do now have a compensation structure that we believe is based and has been adjusted based on inflation, but it's based on similar jobs in the market so that when we're recruiting people, we are recruiting people within a reasonably competitive sort of salary range, but then we have the clear dichotomy between the private sector recruitment and public sector recruitment. And so I don't know if there's been much like data or study on this, but there's sort of a talk or a hope or expectation that the private sector recruitment is going to level off a bit because they've been really ramping up to be able to do all these projects that everybody's expecting to see come through with the bill money. But it's also those projects aren't happening as quickly as maybe they anticipated. So we're hoping things will sort of calm down a little bit, I suppose. But that doesn't change the fact that we need to be very strategic about how we're adjusting our current salaries within our staff to try to recruit them, to try to appropriately compensate them for their work, and then be able to bring people in at competitive salaries in a way that doesn't disadvantage current staff.
Right.
So it's been a nonstop struggle. And one of the other things that I will say that we've realized is that we've had sort of past recruiting strategies, which is around bringing staff in at different levels. Like very often we brought staff in at the most junior level. Whereas I think we need to be a bit better about diversifying that because we can't replace, somebody with 20, 30 years of experience with the agency, kind of one for one in that way. So we need to think about bringing on some sort of more mid-level career folks and as well as junior folks, et cetera, to sort of make our agency more robust. So I hope it'll calm down. It is very challenging and we're kind of putting a lot more resources into trying to be responsive and quick. And we're trying to do it in a rational way, which I think is really important to not sort of overreact to the challenges that are there now. So long explanation, but it's because it's a topic that I care very much about and we've been talking a lot about. And I hope that's, answers your question at least or is of interest to you.
Yeah, and yes, anticipate another question that is the impact on maintaining staff, because so you touched on that in a good way. And the final question relates to bringing moving expenses in. And forgive me if I am going beyond where the committee should go, and you can just tell me that this is just your territory. Have you considered hiring people who are primarily remote would that possibly increase the pool of candidates? Meaning, and also if they only have to come in maybe like once a month or twice a month or so, maybe you could compensate them for that, but it might be less expensive overall, but also increase the pool. Once again, if that's not my territory,
No, it's totally legitimate to ask. And this is something we've had to work very closely with our fiduciary agent, with MAPC on, because we rely on their legal team. Sorry, Eric turns on his camera right away. Because we rely on their legal team, and they're our fiduciary agent. And so we need to work together on kind of what policies we have. And both agencies, in a sense, are constrained based on the sort of the cost of getting, and I may not be referring to this correctly, but sort of the legal and insurance infrastructure in place to be able to retain staff that are out of state, not talking about Rhode Island, New Hampshire, but out of sort of a reasonable commuting distance. That is something that would be a very huge investment from MAPC's perspective and ours, in terms of being able to maintain follow all of the laws in other states to be able to do that. So we are both agencies are staying with recruiting folks who can commute to the office.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah, Len, you're asking all the hard philosophical questions today.
And that
yeah,
was
it's a
it
really
too.
good one.
Yes, that's it. I get them out here, so I mean, I don't
You know
have to
the
do it.
answer,
I
you
don't-
could let me know.
So I won't do it at the MPO meeting later on. So
Well,
thank you.
I just want to be cognizant of our time.
Yeah, I'm fine.
We were supposed to be done 3 minutes ago, and we do have a 10 o'clock MPO meeting, and I'm sure
Sorry.
folks would like to get, no, Len, this is
That was
not
my
about,
last one.
not about you. You're the poet laureate. You can wax and wane as much as you want, especially wax poetically. But I do just want to make sure we can get through this and move it forward. So why
Thank
don't we
you.
go back to Haral, and then we'll kind of ask our final questions when you're done. Haral, can you just try to move it a little quicker, please?
Sure. So this is my last slide. I just wanted to say that our overhead rate for next fiscal year is projected to be 119.34%. So that's an increase again, what we had projected last year, 109.09. And we're projecting that state fiscal year 23 will be at 119.34. That's my presentation.
Wow, that was real quick. Okay, do we have any questions, Derek or Eric or Len? I don't think, I noticed one of our federal partners was here. I don't know if they're still around. So, Haral and I spoke yesterday, and I said then what I'll tell you folks now. Budgeting is not an exact science, but it really is a statement of priorities and values. And I think what this budget sets forth is the priorities and values of the organization of CTPS. And it is to implement the strategic plan and to continue to deliver the very best in transportation services, data management, data information that they do. And the CTPS reputation is well earned over many, many years. And it is clearly something that we're very proud of. And I think this is a very solid budget that is based on very reasonable revenue expectations and based on their years of experience with drawing down funds, executing contracts, and managing what they're doing. We're going to keep working on the operations plan, which will impact this. We won't necessarily know what will come from that in terms of budget, but we are fixed on these arbitrary deadlines. So what I suggest we do, if there's no further discussion, is I'll ask if anybody wants to make a motion, then we can go back to further discussion. And then we can take a vote if that is the will of the committee. Mr. Barassa.
I'll make a motion to approve the, the fiscal year 23 budget.
Yeah, the state fiscal year 23 budget. Leonard Diggins.
We'll second that.
Further discussion. Okay, seeing none. Who wants to call the roll? Haral, you want to call the roll?
Sure. Brian King,
Yes.
Len Diggins,
Yes.
Eric Barrasso,
Yes.
Derek Pravat.
Yes.
That's roll call.
Okay, it was unanimous from those here. Thank you, Haral. And just to note that this committee will meet again. Well, actually, let's move on to member items. Does any member have an item? I have an item, which is that this committee will meet, is it next week? What's today, the 16th? To continue our discussion on the operations plan. We have a bit of a more structured format this time, so I think you'll find it more creative. Not more substantive and less creative. And
Okay.
I also want to just say, and I said this to Tegan and I've said this to Haral as well. For the CTPS staff, you're all welcome to be on these meetings. They're public meetings. I do, however, want to just note that you really need to be accounting for your time accurately. And this is the A&F committee, so we just want to make sure that no one is necessarily charging anything that they're not supposed to be charging. So with that, Eric, I see your hand.
What time is the meeting next week?
If I could jump in,
Yeah.
we're still in the process of getting ready to survey the members for
Okay.
the next meeting. So we actually don't have a meeting planned for next Thursday. And
Great.
so we would,
I'll take it off my calendar.
we will then let everyone know once we have that survey out and once we hear back from everyone what day and time would be best. We're going to throw out a number of options in the survey for people to choose.
Okay, great. So I'll take the 23rd and I'll take the 30th off, I guess, at this point.
Yes.
Pending your survey. That's
Yes.
great because there's also an MBTA Board of Directors meeting next week. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other member items?
I'm pretty sure I responded to that survey. If I didn't, Jonathan, please let me know and I'll respond right away. Thank you.
The survey will be coming out soon. We haven't sent it out yet.
Okay.
It is
Responded
forthcoming.
to a bunch of my survey things, Len.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I gotta get like one a day.
It's a busy
you know.
time of year, at the end of the
Yeah.
fiscal year.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other business,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you. We'll see you all in 20 minutes.
All right.
Brian,
take
can
care.
I
Everyone.
keep you for a second, Brian?
I'll stay right there. Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Earl, would you like me to stay as well? Or, because I'm not going to be at the MPO meeting, so.
Yeah, no, it's just to talk about the MPO meeting, to give Brian a heads up.
I'll drop off then. Bye.
So
Thanks,
Brian,
Brian.
there's an agenda item for approving the budget at MPO meetings. So there'll be a slide dedicated for that. I just wanted to make sure that you don't need any support from me. Basically, it just says Brian came and you'll be presenting the budget for approval.
That is fine. Do you know where it is on the agenda? I actually haven't looked at the agenda yet,
Yeah, let me,
just because I do want to get to my kids' field trip.
I think it's like the first or second.
I'll ask David to take it out of order.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you want to do it like during member, I think there's a section for.
Yeah, there shouldn't be big public comments today, so. Yeah, all right. No problem, Harrell. I'll hang around and do that.
Okay,
Brian, Eric is chairing today, just so you know,
Oh, even better.
the next meeting. And the committee chairs reports are the 5th item.
All right, maybe I'll do it then and not the 9th item. Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Gina.
you. Sure.
thanks.
See you soon.
All right, we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.